I've done cocaine in the federal courthouse, the state courthouse. I've showed up to hearings under the influence of cocaine, under the influence of Xanax. And I remember telling someone that I'd done cocaine in the federal courthouse once, and they said, "Oh, didn't you know you can go to prison forever?" Not forever, but yes. I didn't say I was an idiot. I was addicted. I wasn't an idiot. I did know that that's addiction, right? Compulsive drug-seeking behavior, despite known and probable negative consequences. Of course I knew.
It's The Journey with drug and alcohol attorney Mark G. Astor.
Welcome to The Journey with Mark Astor. I'm your host, Mark Astor. I spent a lot of years sitting across the table from people during some of the most challenging moments of their lives. As an attorney, an advocate, and as someone who understands that the road isn't always straight. What I've learned is that success, recovery, and growth rarely look the way we expect them to. There are detours, hard conversations, and moments that change everything. On this podcast, I talk with people who are willing to be honest about their journey, what worked, what didn't, and what they wish they knew sooner. Today, I am joined by a special guest. I've been chasing him for several years, so I'm glad he's finally here. So my guest today, Brian Cuban, understands that addiction from a very different perspective that very few people can offer. He's an attorney, best-selling author, and a long-time recovery advocate. He's spoken publicly about his struggles with alcohol, cocaine, bulimia, body dysmorphic disorder, and depression, and about how those struggles nearly destroyed his career and life. Brian has been in recovery since 2007 and has spent years helping break the stigma surrounding addiction and mental health, particularly with the legal profession. That's so true. Brian, good to see you.
Good to see you, Mark.
I'm glad I finally roped you in.
Yeah, no, I'm glad we finally connected.
Yeah, I've been wanting to speak to you for a long time because I read your book, The Addicted Lawyer, and I just thought it was just an incredible book. It was very moving. And I've put a lot of lawyers into treatment, and I've represented a bunch of them too. And our own profession is not immune from these issues. What you're doing is really important stuff, and it's really helping not just the lawyers, but a lot of different people. So I'm glad that you came here this morning and just
Well,
spent a
thanks.
little time.
Yeah, we, as a profession, we suffer at over twice the rate of alcohol use disorder, alcoholism, twice the rate of the general public.
Yeah. So let's go back a little in time and tell me about what it was like to grow up in your family and where you grew up.
I'm a boomer. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm the middle of three boys. I have an older brother, Mark, who people may know, Shark Tank and the Mavs and all that stuff. I have a younger brother, Jeff. And my father was very middle class. He ran an auto trim shop with his older brother, and they put on convertible seats and things like that, reupholster car seats and reupholster furniture. And my mom sold real estate. And Mark, as the firstborn, as you might imagine, was outgoing. He was he was just selling this door to door, selling that door to door, garbage bags or whatever as a kid. I remember our local newspapers went on strike. There was a printer strike. They both shut down. He and his buddies drove to Cleveland about 100 to 200 miles away, bought the Cleveland Plain Dealer, drove him back to Pittsburgh and sold him on a street corner in rush hour for twice what they paid for him. So you kind of knew what he was going to be. My younger brother, Jeff, was a good-looking guy, nationally ranked wrestler, jock, beer parties, dates, prom, all the things I associated with love and acceptance and wanted badly. And I was classic middle child syndrome. I was shy. I was withdrawn. And I internalized anything negative said about me and wore it as who I was, like a skin-tight suit. And unfortunately, I had a very difficult relationship with my mother. And I'll tell you a little bit about this, Mark. But I want to make it clear to anyone who watches your podcast, listens to it, that I don't blame my mother, right? There's a difference between cause and correlation. Two people can go through the same thing and take totally different paths. There was a lot of fat shaming in my household. I used to come home from school and I'd go in the kitchen and I'd pull out the Chef Boyardee ravioli and or SpaghettiOs and eat it right from the can before microwaves. And then my mom would come home selling real estate and walk into the kitchen. And it didn't happen all the time, but it happened a bit. She would say, "Brian, if you keep eating that way, you're going to be a fat pig." Now, these were the things my mother's mother said to her. These were the things I'm sure my great grandmother said to my grandmother. Fat shaming and fat talking in families often comes down generationally. And in my case, my grandmother on my mom's side was a Lithuanian Jewish family. with a very strong the Jewish grandmother eat and all kinds of things. And my mother had a very difficult relationship with her. She was a diagnosed schizophrenic, not my mother, my grandmother, and they had a very volatile relationship, unfortunately. And so this is how it was passed down, the things that was said to my mother and then said to me. But being a young child and not understanding this, I grew depressed, obviously, was an obese child, and I began to eat more as a compensator, and I got bigger. And as so often happens when kids change for what other kids perceive in the negative at school, the bullying started. And this was back when bullying was brick and mortar, right? It was back when cell phones were two cups attached to a string, and going viral meant 15 kids knew in a lunchroom knew you had a crush on the girl, passing notes. It was that era. And so the fact I was kids telling me you're a fat pig, you need to get a bra, go to Sears and get a bra for your man boobs, all these kind of things. And this bullying, and I developed a very self-deprecating sense of humor, Mark, because in my mind these kids were the popular kids, the prom king, the prom queens, the kids who were going out on dates, the kids who were going to the after school football games, to the Dairy Queen or whatever, the McDonald's to get together, the house parties, all the things that I wanted to be included so badly, but didn't think fat pigs were entitled to be asked or to ask for. And it all culminated, and I call it the day of the gold pants. My brother Mark, and you may be too young to remember this, there was a dance craze called disco back in the
I'm
70s.
almost 60 years old, but
Okay,
I
so you
appreciate
remember
the compliment.
disco. And it was defined by platform shoes, bell bottom pants, and all these crazy styles. And Mark taught disco in downtown Pittsburgh. And this was 75, 74, 70 to 76. And he would come home with these bell bottom pants and again, the platform shoes with the flowers and all these different things, the really tight shirts, like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever, just like that. And one day he walks into my room, my bedroom, and he's holding a pair of shiny gold bell bottom disco pants. He asked me if I wanted them. I said, sure. I love my brother. We're very close then and now. And I took them, but the pants fit Mark fine. They didn't fit me too well. I had to jump up and down, spray the water bottle. My butt looked like 15 cats trying to get out. But I didn't care, so I wore them to school, and the kids made fun of me. And I'm walking home from school with these kids one day, and I'm wearing my shiny gold bell bottom disco pants, and they're making fun of me, and I'm laughing it off because I figured it was like kind of fraternity hazing almost. If I just took it, then I would be accepted into the group. But that's not how bullying works. And one of the kids pulls at the zipper, and the pants rips right at the zipper, where at the waist. And when another kid goes, ooh, and he pulls, and he rips it right down along the crotch, exposing my underwear. And then these kids physically assaulted me. They ripped off my shiny gold bell bottom disco pants right down to my Fruit of the Loom tighty whities. And I remember I was wearing a Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirt. And they threw them out in the middle of a busy street, cars whizzing by, walked on high-fiving like they'd done the funniest thing ever. I walked out in the street, waited for traffic, gathered them up, covered up my tighty whities, and waddled home. And that walk of shame might as well have been from Boston to Seattle. That's how long it seemed to take, right? And I finally get home, and no one stopped. I'm standing at stoplights, partially naked, half naked, and no one stopped. And I finally get home. The house was empty, funeral quiet. Mother was out selling real estate, dad working, my brothers doing whatever they were doing. And I walked down into our basement. And I remember, Mark, that there were these blue wooden stairs walking down into the basement. And with every step, they creaked. There was this creak. And I never really noticed it before. And each creak felt like a gunshot into a pond. Each creak felt like rippling out to my father. You can't stand up for yourself? Get out. He wouldn't have said that. He loved me very much. Rippled out to my brothers. Dude, you're worthless. They wouldn't have said that. They'd said, let's find these guys. Let's go. To my mother, I told you. She wouldn't have said that. My mother loved me dearly. She was just struggling with her own mental health issues. All these things going through the mind of a 14-year-old boy, tween. So I found a wastebasket. I put away the shreds of the newspapers and the Chef Boyardee cans and all of that, and I buried the pants, hoping it would bury my shame, hoping I would never think about it again. But that's not how shame and trauma works. Shame remembers, trauma remembers, and they tend to thread through our lives, and at least mine, and boil over when you least expect it, and maybe not even know that's what's driving it. And we talk about bright line moments in our lives, Mark, the snapshot moments. I wanted to get through this story because that was a snapshot moment. And that is when I really started to remember seeing my reflection and only seeing a fat pig monster who would never be loved, never get married, never have a girlfriend. And that was an image I dragged through me, dragged with me on a tire chain, that little fat pig boy, through a good portion of the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I was a bully kid too. So I know I'm sitting here and I'm having my own flashback. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it made me very angry as a young adult, very angry. So thank you for sharing that. Tell me about your relationship with your dad.
My late relationship with my dad was great. He was my protector. He was always there for me. We'd go bowling. He belonged to the B'nai B'rith, a Jewish bowling league, and a Jewish boy. So we'd go bowling every Sunday, and he was my father and I were very close, much to the chagrin of my mother because I think she wanted that closeness, but it was just a very volatile relationship. And my mother and I did reconcile up to when she passed from cancer. We had a wonderful relationship, but at that time, I was looking for somebody. I was looking for somebody to protect me. And Mark, my two brothers, Mark was we're far enough apart where we had our own groups, right? Mark was out of the house and in college. He skipped his senior year in high school, Mount Lebanon High School, and went to Pitt. So he was already out of the house. And Jeff had his groups. He was younger, the jocks and all that. And I really was just a loner. I was kind of like the guy who hung out with the guys nobody wanted to hang out with, right? And so my dad was my rock. He was always there for me.
So
But so I didn't tell him about any of this.
you didn't.
No.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember, and I know that we talked about this before because we both had similar experiences with our dads, and our dads have both been gone about almost 10 years now. And I remember telling my dad one time when I got beaten up and I had a chipped tooth and being really emotional about it because I was so embarrassed I couldn't stick up for myself. So I really relate to what you're saying.
Let me tell you what happened when I got sober, or when I had my rock bottom, or my recovery tipping point, as I like to put it better. About a week later, because my then wife at the time, my wife now, but at that time, she had just moved in with me. She moved out. I thought that was done. And so I went over to my father's house, and he lived right across the street from me. That's how close we were. Came to Dallas, he lived right across the street. And after living in Pittsburgh, and I knocked on his door, and he didn't know about any of this. He was the greatest generation. He didn't understand cocaine and all that. He didn't understand that stuff or didn't think about it. And I certainly didn't tell him about it. And so I sat on his couch and I started telling him all this stuff, what had happened. And I started crying and crying. And I was that little boy wanting to have told my father all those years ago about my shame, but was too afraid that he would reject me, and which he wouldn't have done. And he hugged me and he started crying with me. And he said, Brian, move in with me. We'll get through this together. So I did. And I'm fortunate to have had that privilege in my life because a lot of people who go through addiction and recovery do not enjoy that privilege of that core family unit. Estranged families, broken families, incarcerated families. So I acknowledge the privilege I have had in both an intact core family unit, in terms of monetary privilege, in terms of skin color privilege, all the different levels of privilege that I have enjoyed that in some way or another impacted my recovery. Not always in a good way, though. Not always in a good way.
Tell me about when you first started to use.
Drinking started in high school. I drank to just not feel, and drinking intensified in college. And when I went to Penn State, by the time of my sophomore year, I would have been classified as an alcoholic, alcohol use disorder, drinking all the time, drinking at night, drinking alone, drinking in my dorm alone. I was a criminal justice major. I wanted to be a cop. That would have worked out well. I'd have been the first guy in the evidence room stealing the blow. But so I went through, I did get through Penn State and did well enough to get into Pitt Law, where again, my drinking increased. I was a terrible law student. I didn't never wanted to be a lawyer ever. I went to law school simply because I did not want to go out in the world and deal with all of my issues. And I did well enough, fortunately, to get in there and do that. And so law school was really just a means of hiding for me. And you know what, Mark? I speak at a lot of law schools, and that sounds weird, but I talk to students. Every law school I've spoken at, there's been students who come to me and say, I don't want to be here. I do not want to be here. I felt pressured to go. And so, not my reasons, but maybe their first generation, all their parents are lawyers, all they want to be an artist, they want to do this, they want to do that, but they just do not want to be there. And that can certainly be a trigger to depression, to alcohol use in law school, which you carry over to the profession, or drug use. So it's not the norm. It is not unheard of to pressure yourself to go or feel pressure. And for me, it was self pressure. I graduated, I took the PA bar, passed miraculously, and got on a Greyhound bus and moved to Dallas, Texas. That was Labor Day 1986. I met up with Mark, met me at the Greyhound bus station. I moved in with him with the goal of studying to take the Texas bar and becoming a licensed Texas lawyer. And then in the summer of 1987, I failed the Texas bar 3 times, all as a result of drugs and alcohol being more important than studying.
It's okay. I failed the California about 3 times
Yeah.
too.
And the first time I took the Texas bar, my study aids in a hotel room the weekend before were an 8 ball of blow, that's 3.5 ounces, a fifth of Jack Daniels, and a liter of Tab, and some bar review books I borrowed that weekend. That was my mess. But the summer of 1987, I discovered cocaine in the bathroom of a downstairs in a nightclub in Dallas, Texas, of a hotel actually, and I was offered my first line of cocaine. I looked in the mirror, Mark, and for the first time in my life, and what was I? I was 26 years old. The first time in my life after that line, I loved myself. For the first time in my life, I was confident. I looked at that guy in the mirror and didn't see a fat pig anymore. I was just ready to rock the town. So I go upstairs and I'm like, yeah, baby, a little sniffle, a little not worried because I didn't die. I didn't die after the first line. So I'm like, okay. And interestingly, at the time I did that first line, the basketball star, and a lot of people may not know this because they're younger, Lenny Bias. There was a star. He went to the University of North Carolina, first round draft pick, going to play for the Boston Celtics. Died doing his first line of cocaine. And that was big news. And as I leaned over this nasty toilet in this urinal in the bathroom of this hotel, the nightclub upstairs, I'm thinking, man, I hope I don't do that. And I didn't, and I felt great. And that was when I first started to use. And I wanted that feeling. I wanted to feel love. I wanted to love myself. And the way to love myself was through cocaine. So cocaine and alcohol took over my life in the 1980s, through the 90s, through the 2000s. So that's when I started to use.
Okay, why had Mark moved to Dallas?
Mark moved to Dallas. He went to the University of Indiana, IU. And I think it was the boom in Dallas, the construction boom, the oil boom. I think that's just what people who went to the Big Ten schools, they tended to gravitate down to Dallas. Opportunity. He came to Dallas because of opportunity.
Got it. Okay. And your brother Jeff, I know at some point
He lived in. Jeff's had an interesting path. He went to school in Texas. He became a probation officer. Then went in Austin, Travis County. Then went and got his master's, and then he went to work. During the big computer boom, selling computer stuff. And then he went to work for Mark, and he worked for Mark for many years. And I worked for Mark for a little bit, but it just wasn't a good fit. I was more interested in cocaine than.
So that was at the Mavericks. You were working in the Mavericks?
No. When I first went to work for Mark, he had this company called Micro Solutions, and this was I just moved here, and he said, "Come work for me for a while." And what they did was computer consulting. Again, this was the 80s, back when computers and networking computers and the internet was beginning, and all, maybe not even the internet, but Computers were beginning, right? They were getting huge. And so I show up for work at his company. I'm in a suit and tie, a briefcase that has nothing in it. And I'm like this lawyer, right? Let's go. I'm going to be. He looks at me, rolls his eyes, said, "Go home, get rid of that ridiculous outfit and stupid briefcase, and change into your rattiest clothes. Come back here. You will work in shipping and receiving boxing computers like everyone else. You will start at the bottom, and you will learn the business if you want to stay here and work for me." And he said, "There are no lawyers here. There are only people who want to get rich." That's a quote. And me with my big ego, I was, I'm like, fuck, excuse me. I'm like, the hell with that. I'd rather do cocaine and all this other stuff. And so I never worked for Mark with the Mavs. So that was really my short time employed with Mark.
Okay. And then what? I mean, what, you're a lawyer and you
Well,
use.
that's unfair to say. Mark put me to work with him with HDNet, his television company, but never with the Mavs in 2000.
Okay. So Mark has the Mavericks. I think you said that you told me that Jeff was working for him. So what happens after that? What is
So I finally passed the bar. Before that, I'd become a claims adjuster, and I worked for a couple insurance companies. We did called transport insurance, being litigation managers for long haul trucking cases. Didn't require that I be a member of the Texas bar. So I was doing that. And then I went out on my own and became a plaintiff's lawyer, and a plaintiff's lawyer who was addicted to cocaine, shocker, and drinking and all that other stuff, and living that life. And I was the most unethical plaintiff's lawyer there was, Mark. I was Saul Goodman without the drug cartels. I had a ring of chiropractors where this was back before cell phones, where I would get a page. I carried a pager, and I would get a page, and I would go to a 7-Eleven with my roll of quarters, and I would call back the number of the chiropractor, and she'd say, "Brian, I got a fish." Called it a fish. And I would drive down there with my briefcase full of contingency agreements, and I would sit in the lobby, and she would come out. "Mr. Cuban, what are you doing here?" Mr. Cuban was one of our top trial lawyers. Mr. Cuban's never tried a case. And Mr. Cuban won't try a case. He'll sell you down the river. Mr. Cuban will get you maximum settlement for your dollar. Use Mr. Cuban. Mr. Cuban will sell you down that river, and he will cut his fee and hand the case off back when you could do that. You're not allowed to do that anymore in Texas and still get a fee. You actually have to work the case. And Mr. Cuban is just the epitome of the stereotype of the ambulance chaser. And I'm not proud of that, but that's the way I practice law. And it supported my cocaine and alcohol. And this was through the 90s. And that gets around. I eventually lost all my clients because I was showing up to court I've shown up to court. I've done cocaine in the federal courthouse, the state courthouse. I've showed up to hearings under the influence of cocaine, under the influence of Xanax. And I remember telling someone that I'd done cocaine in the federal courthouse once, and they said, "Oh, didn't you know you can go to prison forever?" It's not forever, but yes, I didn't say I was an idiot. I said I was addicted. I wasn't an idiot. I did know, but that's addiction, right? Compulsive drug seeking behavior, despite known and probable negative consequences. Of course, I knew. But that was my life, and I eventually lost all my clients. And then one day, I'm in the locker room of my health club. It was near December 1999. And Mark and I joined the health club. And now I had lost all my clients. I'm about to lose my health club membership, a lot of privilege again. And I'm starting to struggle using up all my savings, except for my cocaine dealer, right? And Mark asked me how it's going. I said, "Terrible, blah, 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 blah." And he said, "Don't worry. I just bought the Mavericks. They're about to announce it. It'll be in January, which would be 2000, and you'll come work for me, and I'll give you a good salary." Saved by my brother. And he didn't know, he knew I was out there on the scene, but he didn't know about these issues. And neither did my younger brother. And so I didn't go to work for the Dallas Mavericks. I went to work for Mark personally. and doing whatever he needed to be done. And then for HDNet, which was his high definition television company. And I was showing up to work, hungover, drunk, much to Mark's chagrin. He put me in charge of when they were building the American Airlines Center. He owned half of it. So I was sitting in a construction trailer. He figures he'd give me some more responsibility with some of the most important people in Dallas, the mayor and all these different people. High, hungover, rinse, wash, repeat, Mark. What's addiction? It's a cycle. It's a vicious cycle. And I was just rolling that cycle, rolling, rolling, rolling. And I hadn't experienced enough consequences yet that were enough to get me to take that step forward. I'd gotten a DWI, although I beat it. I got a DWI and all these different things, failed marriages from drugs and alcohol, but I still wasn't ready. I still wasn't ready. And then in the summer of 2006, just to show you how the insanity of addiction, how crazy it got for me, again, more failed marriages and all this crap, still working for Mark. Summer of 2006, the Dallas Mavericks went to the NBA championship for the very first time against the Miami Heat, right? And so, as you might imagine, I was able to get some pretty good seats for those games. I also had the opportunity to get a couple of tickets for friends. I called up Mark. He said, sure. He says, I went over, I got the tickets. You think I gave them to my friends? Nope. Probably thinking I sold them on eBay for some astronomical amount. Didn't do that either because that would be disrespectful to Mark. I took those tickets and I traded them to my cocaine dealer for $1,000 in cocaine. Selling them on eBay was disrespectful, but trading them to my cocaine dealer perfectly acceptable, right? Addiction. And so my dealer shows up at my house. I was high class. He delivered, and he gives me this giant Ziploc baggie of blow. I go running. I give him the tickets. I go running up to my home office, this long wooden oak desk, and I dump it out on the desk, looking at it like I'm Scarface, right? This giant mountain. I want to go rub my nose in it, take out the dollar bill or the 20 or whatever, roll it up, take the credit card. And cocaine users, what an ironic bunch. Well, you wash your hands, you go through a pandemic, you wash your hands at Purell and all those different things. Make sure you never leave the bathroom without washing your hands. But we'll stick a dollar bill up our nose that's been used by God knows who and has God knows what bent over a toilet that's been used by 15 coke users and meth users before us. But cocaine had long stopped giving me the feeling of self-love and acceptance and that powerful feeling of confidence that I achieved in that nightclub in 1987. Now it was just chasing the high that was never going to come again. And it was never, maybe, Brian, you had a problem. It was, maybe, Brian, you need to change dealers. Maybe, Brian, you need to switch out the Grey Goose for the Jack Daniels. All of these things. And I also developed a level of paranoia. And so I got the impression that the cops were outside. So I go look outside, there's no one out there. And I had this just start shaking, this panic attack. I hide the cocaine, I drive to a Home Depot, and I buy electrical faceplates and a drill and a saw. I drive back to my house, and I go to the drywall in the closets upstairs with these tools, and I cut these fake square rectangular electrical outlets in these closets. And I take the cocaine and I put it in small Ziploc baggies, and I slap it behind all these fake electrical outlets in the drywall, put the faceplate on, the drill, thinking I'm the smartest lawyer ever, hiding my blow, my stash. Like the DEA, the cops, and the drug dogs have never thought of that one before. And so I line out a couple more lines, and again, just pain and shame and the paranoia again. Like 2 hours later, I go back to those electrical outlets. I take the cocaine out. I go to the toilet in my master bathroom and flush it all down the toilet. Now it's like $900 worth of cocaine. The next morning comes. I wake up. I'm staring at the ceiling. You didn't. Come on, Brian. You flushed all your blow down the toilet? Who does that? There's another game tonight. So I got 2 more tickets, called up my dealer again, shows up at my house again. He said, dude, you did all that last night? I didn't want to tell him I flushed it down the toilet like a moron. I said, yes, give me more. So I said, okay, rinse, wash, repeat. Back up to the home office. Again, just pain and shame. And now we're in 2006. And just these awful feelings, the bad highs. Never again. I had been trying so hard to find the right mixture to get that wonderful feeling that allowed me to feel so confident and not feel like the fat pig, and have been chasing it for all of these years in bars and clubs and all of these different places that I just felt so empty and so alone. And the paranoia again, hide the cocaine again. This time I lasted about 3 hours before I went back to them. Just took it again, back out, walked to that same toilet, dropped to my knees like I'd done so many times, hoping or praying for someone or something to take away the pain and shame of my addiction, and flushed it down the toilet again. They say when Dallas flushes, it runs down to Houston. So people in Houston may have had a little extra hop in their step those 2 nights. But right, the insanity of addiction, doing the same thing over and over the same way and expecting a different result. But we know it isn't insane. It's a biological combination, brain based and behavioral based process that affects so many of us, the legal profession, our loved ones, our children, ourselves. And I was no different. I was no exception. The only exception was that I had tons of privilege going through it that people don't have.
Did at any point did either of your brothers come to you and say, "Listen, this can't continue"?
Mark threatened to fire me, and no, but Mark threatened to fire me. But what I did was I distanced from them. Okay, so I distanced because I didn't mention this. I had been to a psychiatric facility in 2005 after a near suicide attempt where I became so hopeless, and this is something to talk about. I finally became so hopeless in 2005 before the Mavs tickets event that I decided to end my life by suicide. And it was very close. A friend of mine who got a disturbing email emailed my brothers, and the first person to come over my house was my younger brother. And there was a 45 automatic on my nightstand, and there was cocaine everywhere. There was Xanax, because I was also using Xanax, cocaining through the night and sleeping through the day. It makes it hard to practice law. Interestingly, I remember I had just popped 2 Xanax one time. I got a call to come down to a ex parte TRO hearing. I got a call from the court clerk. They're trying to do an ex parte. You represent the other person. We want you there. And for those who don't know what an ex parte is, someone goes in and tries to get an order preventing someone from doing something without the other lawyer present. And I'm starting to Xanax out. So I'm driving and I'm like, going down the highway. I have a panic attack. I pull over to the side of the highway and I snort cocaine off my hand. And I get in front of the judge and I'm unshaven, and because I didn't even have time to shower. And I'm in front of the judge and I'm like, oh, she doesn't even look up. She just looks at the pleadings, thank gosh, and goes, denied. And my client shakes my hand and he came down. I thank you. And I went back home and passed out. But I could have killed somebody, right? On the highway. You look at it and you snicker, but I could have wiped somebody out. It was not a funny situation. And they took me to Mark came and they took my weapon and they took me to the psychiatric facility. And they're trying to save my life. And all I can think of is get out of my life. I didn't want, and we're sitting in there and I'm screaming and I'm blaming Mark for everything instead of blaming myself and taking responsibility. But your fame, this and that. And they just sat there. And much to their credit, they just sat there and let me scream. And finally, but it was also dawning on me, Mark, that they were trying to put a psychiatric hold on me. And the lawyer in me, I'm thinking, okay, what is it in Texas? Immediate danger to yourself or others, blah, 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 blah. So I did my best to switch gears. I wasn't going to use the weapon. I'm okay. I'm just dealing with depression, blah, 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 blah. And so the psychiatrist wouldn't sign off on it. So much to my brother's chagrin, I wouldn't do that. And I was refusing to go to treatment. And even though, again, enormous privilege that people don't have, I could have gone to treatment anywhere. Mark would have paid for it, And so they took me back home. And we did what I call kind of the Cuban rehab. They took my car keys, said, stay in the house for 2 weeks, sober up, and it's going to be okay. That's not really a prescription. But they were trying to figure it out as they went along, right? They didn't understand, just like any other family.
People don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's hard to do. What's that gray area between love, enablement, and recovery is so hard for families, mine included. And so they took my car keys, and then I said, fine, my drug dealer delivers, no problem. I'll just bring the party to me, which I did. And my solution wasn't to get sober, it was to distance from my family, distance from my brothers, distance from my parents, and not let any, and only hang out with the people who truly love me until the cocaine ran out, right? The people I partied with. And that's what I did, Mark. And I just went like through a semi fog up through trying to stay employed with Mark because he kept threatening to fire me, trying to put out this, wear this Phantom of the Opera mask that I was this upstanding lawyer and could function in society. And it was getting harder and harder because I was spending more and more time just in bed and not doing anything, not showing up to work, and only doing something when something came to a crisis.
How many years would you say that you were using for?
From 87 on to 2007.
Okay, that's a long time. It's a miracle you didn't kill yourself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I'll backtrack to another story. My second marriage, she didn't, at least she didn't know anything about this, nothing. And she was a neonatal intensive care nurse at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, working the night shift, like the overnight shift. So she would leave. I would go out with my buddies and cocaine all evening, come back, get showered, and be in bed before she got home. And then we got married, and then it wasn't long after we got married. She went to her shift, I went out, and we must have gone through at least 2 8 balls, me and three other people. And again, that's 3.5 ounces. I get home, and my heart explodes. Just boop, 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 boop. And I'm like, oh my God, I'd never experienced anything like that. I'm sweating, my heart's going. And I'm like, calm down, Brian, calm down. And I'm like coughing. I'm trying to do anything to get it to calm down. And it wouldn't. And I called my brother, Jeff, and I said, I think I'm going to die. My heart's doing this. And he said, and I had just gotten married. He said, bite the bullet and call 911. And I hang up and I decide I'm going to try one more thing. We had in my heart, it's just going. I really think I'm going to die. I grab these bottles of champagne that we had left over from our marriage, and I start swigging them. I'm thinking alcohol's a depressant, right? And I start swigging the bottle of champagne, and I get through 3 quarters, and my heart goes back in a normal rhythm. So I go upstairs, I shower, just almost crying, thanking God that I didn't die, and not only that I didn't die, just how the mind works, that I didn't have to tell my wife that my wife wasn't going to find out. I did the mouthwash. I went to try. I jumped into bed, and she got home, and I was drunk, and just pretended that I was asleep.
It's a
And so
wild
I
story.
just that was just dodging a bullet. Maybe I should. It was a bullet. I'm glad I lived, obviously, but maybe I don't like to have revisionist recovery because everything brought me here, and I have the most wonderful wife ever. We've been together 20 years, but all of these things, you look back, it's like, I wonder if I'd done this or this, but I wouldn't be right here where I am today.
So I want to. There must have been a point in time where you said, "Okay, I'm just done."
Yes, there was. It
Okay,
was
tell me
Easter
about that.
weekend 2007. My wife had just moved in with me. We weren't married yet. And she went away. She didn't, she would later say she suspected, but she went away for the weekend. I went out. It was a Friday, and it was a bachelor party downtown Dallas, and cocaine and all this stuff, and just going. Next thing I know, it's Sunday evening. Think she was going to be back Sunday. I figured, okay, I'd do my thing. She would never know, right? And next thing I know, it's Sunday evening. She's looking down at me. I'm looking up, trying to figure out what day it is. There's cocaine on the dresser. There's pills on the dresser. I'd had a 2-day drug and alcohol induced blackout. And she's a lawyer. I'm trying to figure out what lie I can tell to explain this law and order episode orgy of evidence that I might not be the person I represented myself to be. And she's probably wondering if she walked in the right house. And all I can think of, Mark, is a metaphorical running home to mama. I said, take me back to, and I named the psychiatric facility. Wait, you've been to a psychiatric facility? Yeah, I'll talk. I need this drive to think of a better lie to explain what there's only one explanation for. So we're standing in the parking lot now of this psychiatric facility, me for the second time in my life. And three things occurred to me. One, she was going to leave. I'd leave. I'd run like hell. She didn't. She stood by me and we dated for over a decade while I rebuilt the broken trust and found sobriety. And now we've been together over 20 years. And two, there wasn't going to be a third trip back because I'd be dead. And three, I thought about my father. I thought about my father, who was the greatest generation, fought in the Pacific at Okinawa, CB, fought in Korea, just old school. Again, ran in car seats in this shop not far from where we lived from the end of the Korean War until his older brother Marty, passed away in 1990. And then that's when Mark hit it big, and he said, "Dad, you're retired." And he would say to Mark, Jeff, and I growing up all the time, he said, "Guys, no matter what happens, no matter where you go, whether it's across the city, across the state, across the world, you call your brother. You make sure your brother is okay. You tell your brother you love him. You make sure you are always there for family." And my father was the middle of three boys like me. And this was the relationship he had with his two brothers. The oldest is still living today. He's 92 in California, who my wife and I are going to go see very shortly. Family, family. This is what our father stressed. And I thought about that. And I didn't want to lose that. And not that I was lost my brother's love and my parents' love, but family's distanced. My brothers were frustrated, and I wouldn't want me around their nieces, around their children. And so family's distanced. He got to the point where they knew I had to do it myself, and they couldn't be a part of that, right? And they understood enablement by that point. And so I didn't want to lose that. And if you want to know how that stuck, all these decades later, 1,200 miles from Pittsburgh, where we grew up, Mark, Jeff, and I live walking distance to each other. And my father, until he passed away, lived across the street from me, literally across the street. My mother had a place across the street from me that Mark, again, privileged, held for her, although she preferred to be in Pittsburgh. That is the bond of family, the wanting to live that saved me. And so the next day, I walked Easter weekend. The next day, I walked into the room of 12 step. That was my path. There are many paths. That was my path. I was only offered two choices by my treating psychiatrist, who had been saying for a decade, lying. Why would you lie to your psychiatrist? Shame knows no hourly rate, right? I was ashamed. Finally getting honest with him. And we only talked about two options. It was treatment or 12 step. And I was way too proud still, the ego, to go to treatment. I said, I can't go to treatment. I'm a busy lawyer. I have no cases. And I'm barely working. I'm barely surviving, but I'm a very busy lawyer. Would you consider 12 step? There was a meeting right next door, literally, my home group. And he goes, and I said, I can't go to 12 step. I can't. I see them out there. They're smoking outside. Secondhand smoke will kill you, doctor. I can't go to 12 step. There's always looking for all these reasons. But I knew that I had to show my brother something because I didn't want to lose my family. And eventually I had to show Amanda, my wife, something, although at that point I thought she was gone. And so I walked through the doors at 12 step. I sat down in the corner and I was crying and I smelled and I just drenched in sweat. And when I sat down, I really wasn't thinking alcoholic or anything like that. You know what? I sat down in that uncomfortable red hunk of plastic in the corner. And I thought to myself, if sitting here will allow me for the first time in my life, the first time, and now I'm in my 40s, to wake up one morning, walk to the bathroom mirror, birthday suit naked, look in the mirror and love myself without the aid of cocaine or alcohol or any of the Xanax or anything like that. If sitting in this chair will allow me to do that, I'll sit in this chair. And that was the beginning of my recovery, which is coming up around 19 and a half years today.
Wow, congratulations. It's really an amazing story. Let me shift gears a second with you, Brian. Can we talk about the book? Because that was really, after I read the book, was
Sure.
what I really wanted to connect with you. Tell me about the book, the first book, The Addicted Lawyer.
Addicted Lawyer, I'd written a book before that called Shattered Image, which was about my struggles with body image. And that was like a self-published thing back in 2013. That it got a lot of play because of my last name, particularly in colleges, because it was more about eating disorders. But I really wanted to cover my struggle with addiction and how it impacted my life as a lawyer. So I did scanning and then I looked around and there hadn't been a book written about it since 1990. So I decided that I was going to write a book about that. And so that's really what drove that. And I didn't want it to be a typical memoir. I interviewed law students, I interviewed law professors, and I put that all in the book. And so I wanted to be something that was more as much empirical as it was my story. So people could understand that there are different, my story is just my story. This law student's story is just her story or his story or their story, this lawyer's story. We all have our different stories, right? And mine is no better or worse. It's just my story. So I wanted to address that in the book as well. And I interviewed Patrick Krill. Patrick Krill wrote the foreword, and Patrick Krill is a big name in the lawyer addiction field. And so I did all these things. And then it's funny, when the book was ready to come out, and I started looking again, and there's Lisa Smith released her book, A Lawyer Walks Out of a Bar. A wonderful book, just an incredible book. I'm like, damn, she beat me to it. And Lisa's great. Lisa, I love Lisa. But yeah, so we became the only two books out there on the topic, and as you might imagine, we did very well with the lawyers and the law schools.
Yeah, do you feel like that book was cathartic for you to write?
You know what? I would say Shattered Image, the very first one, if you can ever find it, was cathartic. That was a exercise in pain and just releasing pain. I talk a lot more about my relationship with my mother, and there was a lot of grandparent alienation because my mother refused to let my grandmother see us and things like that. So I addressed these really emotional core issues, and I talk much more in depth about the bullying incident. So that book was really that. The Addicted Lawyer was really something I felt was needed in the legal profession because there was just nothing out there, and I felt we were a profession in crisis. And it just so happened that the Betty Ford Hazelton study came out right in this same area too. That gave all those stats on lawyers suffering at twice the legal rate and alcoholism as twice the rate of the general public and all these different metrics. There are a lot more metrics than that. And so it all just kind of came together at the same time. But I just thought it was something lawyers needed to hear from a lawyer who struggled because at that time, I thought it was really something that was taboo in the profession, taboo in law firms for sure, a little less taboo in solo lawyers speaking out about it, but still very shameful. And so that's why I wanted to do it.
Yeah, I know you've written a couple of other books. Tell us about those.
Yeah, I got into writing novels. How many times can you tell your own story? I got into writing novels and I wrote The Ambulance Chaser, which is about a ambulance chasing lawyer in Pittsburgh who finds himself accused of the murder of a high school classmate 30 years prior after her remains are discovered in a construction site. So he's arrested and has to go on the run. He's charged. He goes on the run to find the true killer. Now that movie has been optioned and is Lou Diamond has signed on to direct that movie and hopefully will start production next year.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah,
Really.
very exciting. So if you get a chance, check it out. Now, I wrote another book called The Body Brokers, which is based on a actual story out of Pittsburgh of a treatment center that was actually a front for a fentanyl distribution ring, where they were keeping their clients high on fentanyl and sending them out in the street to deal fentanyl to make money for the center. And so they were, that came out and the guy got sentenced to like 8 years in federal prison. So I took that and went, okay, this is an interesting story. And obviously it has been advertised in The Body Brokers, which is about a similar issue.
I mean, it sounds like your whole life has changed. What's a day in the life of Brian Cuban like these days?
Singing practice. I've been taking singing practice for almost over 4 years now. Why? Why not? Right? I grew up playing the piano and I knew I was never going to be Billy Joel, but I played. I grew up singing and had a traumatic incident in summer camp where I was bullied severely, where I signed up to do a singing contest hoping that would pull me out of it, and I only croaked. And the kids laughed at me and I ran off. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn how to sing just so I can belt out a karaoke tune for no other reason. I've
Okay.
been taking singing lessons just to do that. I still write. I'm working on my third novel, which is called Blood Capital, which takes place, it's set in Dallas. It's about without giving too much away, it's about a young soccer star who's kidnapped from a private school and held for ransom by a cartel to put pressure on her mother to not testify against a cartel individual. It's less about cartels than about the venture capital startups and things like that, but it does have cartel background. And so I'm doing that, and I'm in the third act of that. And my wife and I, we have two cats. My wife and I live very quiet lives. You know how it is when you recover, you shrink your life to this big. And my life has stayed that way. I no longer, the people who were my friends are no longer, I no longer have contact with those people. The people, you know who my friends are now, Mark? The people who were my friends before I went off the rails, right? The people who tried to talk to me, all those people. Those are the same friends I have had since way back who didn't live that life. Those are, and who drifted away from me as I went into that life. Those are my friends now.
And what about with your brothers? Are you guys
We're
still?
very close. Yeah, I'm going to see them both Thursday for lunch this Thursday, and I'm going to see my brother Jeff Wednesday for dinner. As you imagine, it's with schedules, it's never easy to get together, but we see each other when we can, and we're always texting. So we still live walking distance to each other.
So what does the future look like for you
The future looks like
when you grow up?
novel. You know what? It's interesting because I'm 65 now, and your train of thought really shifts, right? Because it's not even just like halfway over the edge, you're a lot over the other side. And
Yeah.
so it's what can I do? And again, I don't want everyone to, I want people to understand that I understand the privilege again. And so I don't want people, you can do those things and I can't. I get it. I get that. But this is my life. I think about how I can maximize the years I have left and live in peace and avoid drama and avoid chaos that I lived, the drama and chaos that I lived in for decades. Yeah, I try to do that, and I try to be impactful where I can be in terms of the things that are important to me. We just started a family foundation, and we started it last year, but now we just started giving out grants. And I have given out grants, the ones I choose, everyone in the foundation. It's mostly my brothers, my wife's in it, my younger brother's wife, and this really isn't Mark. This is my younger brother and I, although Mark's plays a role, but this is my younger brother and I deciding who gets grants, and my wife and extended family. But I've given out probably $250,000 in grants, awarded grants to social service organizations, harm reduction organizations, home transitional homes for males, transitional homes for females in Dallas and Pittsburgh and in different parts of the country. And so it's just so gratifying to be able to do the things and make a difference in the things that are important to me. And I like it that our foundation doesn't have like this rigid mantra, right? Got to do this, we stay in this. I'll see something. Oh, that's cool. I just gave to a pediatric cancer foundation because I saw something on television. Somebody threw out a first pitch at a Pirates game, this young kid suffering from cancer. I'm like, oh, who is that? So we gave them a grant. It just, something, if I connect with it and they're doing good, we'll look at it. And I enjoy doing that.
You're helping a lot of
Feels
people.
good.
It's really
It
admirable what you've done.
feels good.
You're making a difference, and I think at the end of the day, that's what it's really all about, right? Is making a difference.
That's all I can do. Somebody asked me about, and they have the Brian Cuban Wellness Fund now at Pitt Law that I started it years ago with $1,000, and now it's huge. So I guess if you want to talk about legacy, there you go. Somebody asked me about legacy once, and I said, it's hard for me to think about, right? I'll be underground. What's the difference? I'm glad that fund is there, but yeah, it's do good today, give the money today, and do the next right thing. And however that ends up, when I'm just a memory, that's how it ends up.
So, for the folks who are going to watch this, I know that you do speaking engagements. Tell us about how people can get in contact with you, find out about
Uh,
more about the foundation, all
yeah,
of
you
that.
can write through my website. If you just message me through my website, it'll come to me, or it's not like my email secret. It's Brian with an I at briancuban.com. I also have a website I haven't written in a while, but it's www.briancuban.com. Again, Brian with an I, where I have a blog, but I haven't blogged in a while. I need to. But you can see a lot of my different speaking gigs on there and stuff like that. And you can buy the ambulance chaser and my books there, of course, and all those different things. But yeah, so I do a lot of speaking engagements. I enjoy keynoting. It goes in shifts. I'm not as at this age. I'm not a road. Being a road warrior isn't something that appeals to me. But I do get out there and I do them when invited.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I hope that we're going to stay in contact because this is,
Absolutely. I'm glad we finally got to connect.
yes, I'm
And,
glad. And
we will definitely stay in contact. And if
I'm
you need
going to.
anything, just let me know.
Thank you. And for the folks that are watching this, if you want to learn more about what we do, mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. And until the next episode, thanks for tuning in.